One big sign you should keep trying with him. We're going to dive into this today. Can you accept a man for who he is? One of the challenges with dating and relationships today is the need for accelerated learning, accelerated learning. And I'll explain that in a minute, but I just want to go back in time for those of you who are either tail end baby boomers or Gen Xers who might have seen the movie When Harry Met Sally. If you remember this movie, it was two people who were put together because they were ride sharing from, I believe, Michigan to New York, and I could be making a mistake. It could have been Wisconsin. Anyway, to New York, and they spent some time together. They didn't like each other. Then 5 years later, they bumped into each other, and they still didn't like each other. And then 5 years later, they bumped into each other, began a friendship, and eventually fell in love with one another. Certainly a very long timeline to get to know a person. Now we'll look at the TV show Friends. If any of you remember Monica and Chandler, Monica had a little bit of OCD when it came to cleaning things. Chandler was bad at jokes, but they spent quite a bit of time getting to know one another, getting past this particular factor I'm going to share with you in a moment, much like in Harry Met Sally, to form a lasting relationship where they eventually got married. And then there's the movie 40-Year-Old Virgin. Okay, those of you might remember it came out in the early 2000s, I believe 2005. Person that runs into or meets somebody at the store that they're working at, eventually start to go on dates, but they decide not to have sex. They wait 20 dates to have sex. They took time to get to know one another. It wasn't this accelerated experience that we're feeling today. But the challenges in each one of these relationships is they experience what is affectionately talked about in the show Nobody Wants This is the ick. Now, what's interesting about the ick, if any of you, let's go back in time, remember the TV show Seinfeld. It seems like all of the characters on Seinfeld, not so much Kramer, always seem to always find a reason not to keep trying with someone. In the case of Jerry Seinfeld, it was she ate her peas with a fork. She had man hands. She was a close talker. She was a far talker. And she walked around naked. The list goes, were her boobs real? He seemed to find a reason to have an ick in all of these experiences. We're going to experience the ick. We're going to experience differences. And the question is, should you keep moving on? Should you keep moving forward with someone? Should you keep trying? See, the challenge today, these days, as I said, it requires making fast decisions based on a few factors. Mostly it's based on looks and entertainment. Looks and entertainment. Why do I say this? Well, how many of you have gone on a first date with someone immediately you didn't have chemistry with them? Usually based on physical attraction, but there's another form of chemistry that's a little bit different. We'll dive into that for a second. But it's based on looks and entertainment. Did they take me out to a nice dinner? Did they show affection through monetary means by entertaining me? See, unlike the other relationships we talked about, there was a slow, gradual getting to know one another. It wasn't on this accelerated pace based on particularly on looks and entertainment. See, rarely do we get to know someone at a heart-centered level. Rarely are couples talking about their values early on in a relationship, their vision in a relationship. Do they even talk about whether or not they can blend lives with one another? And most importantly, emotional maturity, which we'll get into these days. See, what's interesting is most humans have childhood wounds and adult traumas that have gone unaddressed that cause them to choose the wrong person repeatedly. If you find that you're choosing someone like the bad boy that's oftentimes illustrated, that guy that's elusive, that guy who's emotionally unavailable, that guy who is avoidant in his affections. See, you might be attracted to this person on a subconscious level, and you may not be aware of this, but if you're watching this today, you're going to get an education on this. But on a subconscious level, you might be attracted to that bad boy, that guy that makes you feel butterflies in your stomach, that makes you feel anxiety. And if you're not familiar with the book, Getting the Love You Want by Harvell Hendricks and Helen Hunt. I highly recommend reading this book. You'll understand why you might be choosing the wrong person, because it triggers something inside of you that makes you believe that it's love. That makes you believe it's love. How many of you found yourselves in a relationship with someone who really wasn't the right person for you, but you were hooked, you were attached, you kept going based on an unhealthy experience with this other person? You see, the reality is these days is most couples form an insecure attachment versus a secure attachment. Let me dive into that for a second. If you haven't read the book Attached by Amir Levine and Rachel Heller, I highly recommend reading this book so you can get some understanding on insecure attachment. I want you to go back and look at every one of your past relationships after reading these two books and ask yourself, did you make choices from an emotionally healthy state or an emotionally unhealthy state? See, here's the thing. Anyone you meet who's right for you isn't going to trigger the insecure love attachment. The right person that you meet most likely will be boring. They're not creating a tremendous amount of emotional chaos. You're not experiencing those wild butterflies when you meet a person who's most likely aligned with you. And here's one reason, here's one thing, I'm going to share this with you. If you're out there in the dating marketplace, and I call it a dating marketplace because the reality is it is a marketplace. Unfortunately, okay, look, we no longer live in tribes. We no longer live in villages. We no longer live in towns per se that afford us opportunity to meet people who are like-minded on a day in, day out basis, especially if you're in midlife. And I always say midlife is after baby making years and before retirement. Most of us are not surrounded by single eligible people. In the case of Harry Met Sally, they were much younger in that story. And back in the 80s when that movie came out, and certainly Friends came out in the 90s where we still socialized at the coffee shop and that sort of thing. And even then, even in the 40-Year-Old Virgin, they met at work. You know, that doesn't seem to happen today. These days, we're meeting, that dating marketplace is the internet. And it's requiring this accelerated, experience because we don't take enough time to get to know one another in most cases to find out who this person is beyond the surface, beyond the looks, beyond the entertainment. What's underneath? Who is this person? Are they really right for me? So if they don't trigger that anxiety, if they don't trigger that boredom, then I invite you to find out this question, because this is going to, I believe, help you determine if it makes sense to move forward with this person. And the question is, do they have emotional maturity? Do they have emotional maturity? That's a question I invite you to ask, because emotional IQ is its own form of currency. It's its own form of energy, just like taking you out to dinner. It's its own form of energy, its own form of currency. Emotional IQ, emotional maturity. So how do you determine someone's emotional IQ and emotional maturity? I think it's really, really important to ask this one question. What healing work have you done? Now, we need to expand on this. What healing work have you done? Or you might want to start with, are you familiar with childhood wounds and adult traumas, what that means to you? And by the way, folks, childhood wounds and adult traumas doesn't have to be abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse. It could be garden variety, fucked up shit. I wasn't supposed to use the F word in my Sunday videos. The effed up stuff that happens in our childhood or in our relationships. See, every experience oftentimes carries a wound or a trauma in the experience. And that trauma, if unchecked, if unhealed, will repeat itself again and again and again. So I invite you all, if you're dating right now, if you're in the dating marketplace, to ask yourself or ask this person, What healing work have you done? What personal development, what self-help, what spiritual work, what therapy have you done to this point in your life? I can tell you that a significant percentage of people in the dating marketplace are like deer in the headlights. What's that? Well, here's the thing. If we don't address our past, if we don't address our wounds from our childhood, and most of us all have some sort of abandonment or rejection wound from our childhood, and then in our relationships, especially if you found yourself in somewhat of a toxic relationship, it requires some healing. It requires some inner work to move past it. Because here's the thing, the person who's done the work or is doing the work, let me say this, you have a greater chance for success. That's the person you should keep trying with, even if it's a little bit boring, even if they don't look perfect, even if they don't entertain you by climbing to the highest room of the tallest tower. And I do that intentionally. I do that to make fun of that narrative because that's somewhat of an expectation for a lot of people. By the way, it's 11:11 right now, and my coffee mug says, "I make the world go around. What do you do?" I realized after owning this cup for years, it's coffee makes the world go around. So I want to come back to the differences, the icks, because if you should keep trying, should you accept this person? I want to bring it back to that show I mentioned earlier, Nobody Wants This. Have you seen that on Netflix? If you haven't, I highly recommend checking it out. But there's a scene where Joanne experiences the ick with Noah, the ick with Noah. He brings flowers to her mother and he wears a sport coat, and she just found that revolting. But he stood, as she was getting ready to sabotage the relationship, he leaned in from an emotionally grown up place and saying, I get you. I'm here for you. I mean, these aren't his exact words. I get you. I'm here for you. You're not going to make me run away. See, he was leaning into it because he operates from a place of emotional maturity. Most likely all the work he had done as a rabbi to become emotionally available in relationship. So if you're going to decide, if you want to decide who to keep making effort with, I'm here to encourage, look for the man who's done the work, look for the man who is doing the work, look for the man who's looked at his past and says, I need to work on myself so I can become a better version, because that's when you operate from the place of being the best version of yourself. And I highly recommend everybody reading the book, The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. I believe there's now 5 agreements, but I highly recommend reading this book. Because when a person operates from their best selves, not from a professional capacity, see, oftentimes humans give a lot of credit to beauty and money. Isn't it fascinating? The more beautiful a person is, the more attractive they are, the more high quality they're perceived. And certainly somebody who has financial success is considered high quality, when quite frankly, it has nothing to do with their character, has nothing to do with their ability to navigate their emotions or regulate their emotions. Only the human beings who have done the work. Now, are there people out there that have been blessed with really idyllic childhoods and good past relationships? Yeah, that's the exception, not the rule. It's kind of like the broken clock. You find them, twice a day kind of thing. But if you're in the dating marketplace and it is a sea of dysfunctionality, whether we like it or not, and as I said before, the way we're meeting people, we have this expectation of accelerated learning based on looks and entertainment. And I'm here to encourage to look past that and say, does this person even have the capacity to explore a relationship with me? And by the way, those folks who have done the work or are doing the work, they have a greater chance for success. Because as I said before, attraction is by the way, let me just share with you, if you're not familiar with my, bear with me 1 second, my relationship iceberg, please forgive the glare. Attraction, that's above the waterline. Chemistry. What's most important is compatibility, shared values, shared vision, blendable lifestyles, and lastly, emotional maturity. Without that emotional IQ, it's going to be radically challenging to develop a relationship with someone who hasn't addressed, even on a base level, their past experiences, whether it was from childhood, whether it was the last person they went out with, or their marriage. I can tell you, those folks that have done the inner work, they might be boring. They may not trigger you like those butterflies, but they have a greater chance for success. So I want you to accept those guys. I want you to keep trying with those guys. And here's a quote I want to leave you with because it's something I came up with yesterday. Because many of us want to know, where's this relationship going? I would say after 90 days, if you've invested time with someone, you want to know, is this something real? Does this have real potential? Or is it just going to be somebody I used to know? And so here's the thing. In many cases, we men don't know where it's going at the 90-day mark. But, and I can speak from my own personal experience, I don't know where it's going. What I do know is, and this is the type of man you might want to be seeking, is the man who says, I don't want to stop getting to know you, to experience you, to feel all of who you are. I don't want to stop getting to know you at a deeper level, because just like those movies we talked about, in each one of those cases, love didn't happen on the first, second, or third meeting. Love happened building something, walking through the doors of love, walking through the experiences together, because it is through those experiences you build the deep roots of trust. And I just want to remind those of you that are in long distance relationship, trust isn't built over the telephone or texting. Trust is built through social activities, hobbies, mutual interests, spending time with family and friends, traveling together, teamwork, building skills, both in your personal and your professional life. That is how trust is built. So if you find yourself spending more time on the telephone and texting instead of face-to-face, it's going to be rather challenging to know if this person is a keeper or not. Is this sinking in? Is this resonating with you? Please let me know. I'd like to hear your thoughts. Post a comment below. I do my best to read them all in the first 24 hours. As always, if you find value in my videos, please hit that like button. Please share this video. Please subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell so you can be notified, or maybe the notification bell is there to be notified of new videos. And if you want to connect with me directly, there's links below to schedule a discovery call with me to see if working with a coach is right for you. There's a link to join my group called Midlife Love Mastery. There's a link to follow me on Instagram to get all the books I recommend are listed below, and also my dating vows, which is highly, I'm going to say, important in the early stage of dating. All right, I'm going to wrap up this video as I always do. First off, give myself a big, gigantic Jonathon bear hug of self-love. I'm going to reach into the camera and give you a hug of love, if that's okay. I'm going to ask you to turn to someone, a pet, a teddy bear, a pillow. Give it or them a hug of love, because hugs are a great source of love. And let's face it, we could all use more love in our lives. Thanks a bunch. Bye-bye now.